was blind, but now I see.
There was a French monk who was part of a Carmelite monastery in the 17th century France, and he was Brother Lawrence. He grew up quite poor, and he served in the military. And he was also a thinker and a dreamer. The legend of his story goes that one day he was out looking at a tree, and he began to contemplate that the tree lives through the seasons. It decays and loses leaves and seems almost dead, but then life comes back to it. And Brother Lawrence thought, I think that's what God is doing with my life. I've been brought to the brink of death and decay and despair. But like the tree, I think God will bring me back to life. And eventually he went to the monastery and he dedicated his life in service. And at the monastery, he didn't try to become one of the elevated monks who would be a wise teacher or leader. He took on his work and his chores as service. He worked 30 years in the monastery as a cook in the kitchen. And in later years, he worked to repair sandals. And the legend says he went barefoot, but he was fixing sandals for others. He was known, and he's been known as one who practiced the presence of God. And that is the name of a collection of writings that people composed after he died. They took letters that he had written and different teachings and devotions that he had given, and they titled it, The Practice of the Presence of God. And essentially what it boils down to is his approach that in every kind of action, every task, whatever it was, wherever it was, he said, I'll do this with God. God is with me in my task. God is with me in the chores, and suddenly it's all worth doing. He wrote, we can do little things for God. I turn the cake that is frying on the pan for love of God. And that done, if there is nothing else to call me, I worship God, who has given me grace to work. Afterwards, I rise happier than a king. It is enough for me to pick up but a straw from the ground for the love of God. Okay, so that's saint status right there. We don't all have to be there this morning. But he is one who is known as, he would say, I wash dishes to the glory of God. And honestly, I think of that sometimes when I am washing dishes, when I finally get to my chores, and it helps. It does give me a sense of God's presence. So the way Jesus sends the disciples out today, we could say they're kind of like chores, but notice that the text describes when they get back from their journeys, they are filled with joy. The 70 were sent in pairs to greet and proclaim peace and eat with people and give good news, and they returned in wonder. And I think what a thing it is to practice the presence of God. We notice the joy in their work, and we notice too that they did it together, off in pairs, mission in community. The consolation and reassurance of relationship is an instruction that the boss gives to the workers. And that just makes sense to me. If I'm going to do a task or to do the labor or do the chore, I know for myself, I can't trust myself to continually practice the presence of Shaun the whole time and have a great task done. And try as I might, that joyful presence has its limits, and we're all like that. We're human. But we do help each other. We do bear the light to one another with an encouraging word or with an affirmation. We are lifted up. And I just know when the work is hard, we're better together. It's like Christ says, be community. Go and do the work and visit and call others to this sense of community. Remember from Holy Trinity Sunday, God is community. Community is how we live and worship, and it's even how we work. Beloved community, I think it's a heartbeat and a prayer of the people of God. And how do we daily become better and more graceful? So I asked you that question of welcoming community, and I hope something blessed has come to mind. For me, my story is when I was Maven Winter's age, girls, when I was 10, I haven't told you this, I got invited to the men's canoe trip at our Bible church. And it was like a father-son thing or an uncle-nephew thing or a helpful wise guy brings a young boy kind of thing. It was a men's canoe trip. And we go out there to the rivers in Texas and we get trained on if a snake falls into your canoe from the tree, here's what you do. Because you're always trying to find that shade, but snakes are in the trees. So we go on this trip and it's awesome. And I'm 10 years old and there's canoeing and there's soccer and there's hot dogs and s'mores. And there were some guys who came on the trip, some of the older guys, and they didn't get in the water. They didn't go canoeing. And I thought, why are you even here? The water is everything. We're going to tump each other over. We're going to race down the rapids. What are you doing not getting in the boats? What I didn't realize is they were this cooking team. Their whole reason to drive 200 miles with big trucks and tents and all this food from Costco, it was Sam's back in the day, I guess, packed up trucks, their whole reason was just to go and cook food for everybody. And a 10-year-old, I couldn't understand why they would even do that. Now, as I look back, I see, oh, they were serving. What a beautiful thing to go all that way and then sit in the heat of the Texas sun only to be making food for all the ones who got to go have fun on the river and just be there all day to do that. And I realized what a gift they give to community. And then I also realized a bit later, it must have been really affirming for them to give their gift. Like in their giving, they probably felt like community. It felt worth it to be there and to play their part. And I hope they were uplifted. One of the guys named Gary, he was older and he was in church, someone who would whistle while the hymns would be played. And I remember I didn't understand, why is this guy whistling everything? Sometimes it's a little like, woo, there he is. But he was actually an expert whistler too. It was just different. You didn't expect it, but you knew when he was in church because of the whistle. And so when I was younger, I kind of had a weird relationship with it. What's going on with this guy? It's a little distracting sometimes. I go on the canoe trip and I see Gary in a few different forms. I see him be a leader, be a helper, pull canoes up and down, make jokes. And I remember getting back to church on a Sunday and singing songs, and there was the whistle, and I just had a different relationship to it. I really was thankful Gary was with us. And now every time he would whistle, I knew more about it, and I said, that's our community. And you could see visitors kind of turn their heads like, who's whistling? And you think, okay, you just don't quite know all the ins and outs of the community yet. And you don't have to know, but it will grow on you. And it's a beautiful part of community. Well, here we are. You and I have found each other on this canoe trip of life. And here we are under the same big tent for a little while. And we've been formed and called. As much as we try to make decisions about what's right and where to be and have the foresight, a lot of life unfolds for us. The 12 apostles that ministered with Jesus, he called to them, and it was a total interruption of their regular lives. In our text today, it says there were 70, that are appointed. In that moment, they are told, you're going. So take in, there's a lot happening. The Spirit is moving beyond our control. And part of the beauty of community is you and I have a chance to be together for a time, and hopefully we hear some of the people who've gone before us testify to the unfolding. That we do our part, but God forms us as beloved community, and we're creatures under the care and sending of our Creator. British author and pastor Sam Wells says it this way: if we weren't interested in the unity of the church, we shouldn't have been baptized. Telling another Christian, I have no need of you, is really telling Jesus, I have no need of you. Church means calling together Christians of all kinds, in all ways, across all barriers, and bringing them face to face and holding them in the presence of God until they say to one another, I need you. There's the presence of God again, and there's a picture of church and community. Today, it's like Jesus gives us our baptismal chores and sends us out in pairs to remind us that we need one another and that we remind each other of the grace that makes us free to practice the presence of God. Part of our practice today is God gathering us. God gathers you through baptism and around this communion table where we share a meal together. You are cared for, nourished, forgiven, sustained, and you are called, sent out to imitate God's love in proclaiming peace, in sharing meals, and in spreading the good news. Amen.